Archie.
George Bodine, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad to be here and to see you. I've been looking forward to this. You know, I'm going to tell you something before even we start, Archie. I just want you to know something. I have tremendous respect for what you've done, which is to come out from behind the mirror and to kind of just dox yourself and say, this is who I am, show your face, especially in a time when things have gotten a little bit hairy as far as physical attacks on Bitcoiners and security concerns and stuff. So, you know, and I followed you. I told you before, I think I followed you when you first started that account on X. And it's just been, it's been fun to watch that grow and to read your content and then to actually see your face. And I'm a strong believer in Bitcoin success depends upon its adoption and the spreading the word to different people and getting that word out. It's one of the reasons, even though I haven't done podcasts in the past, I just recently started. And so I'm doing it almost like a service. I'm still uncomfortable with it sometimes, but anyway, I really admire what you've done.
Thank you. I really appreciate that because I was hesitant to come out and dox myself. It's not because I'm like a shrinking violet or anything. I'm actually quite an extreme extrovert.
I can tell.
And I had to learn through my 30s to appreciate living like an introvert a little bit more. But I think a situation with a podcast like this, I have a lot more control over the environment in which I engage and share who I am. I think I'd find it a little bit disconcerting once or if I start getting recognized in public. I'm not sure how I'm going to handle that, but that's part of, I guess, the growth of the experience, isn't it?
It is, and like I said, it takes courage. And you know, as someone recently pointed out on stage, it takes courage and conviction to be in Bitcoin to begin with. And you know, this is a battle that we're in sometimes. You know, I had a great question the other day from somebody, and they asked me, they said, if you were to classify Bitcoin as a sport, you know, what sport would you pick? Now, let me just ask you that real quick, and then I'll tell you what I said.
Bitcoin, the monetary network and...
Just Bitcoin.
Just Bitcoin. Oh, well, it's interesting because how do people think of Bitcoin? Like, is it the community? Is it the ethos? Is it the technology, the software, the people? I think it's all of that, isn't it? And it's quite an unwieldy sort of beast.
Beast.
Yeah.
So I tell you right now, the other gentleman had some really neat analogy, but for me, it's blood sport. I mean, you know, it is gladiator swords, dinosaurs, whatever you want to use. It's blood sport. And I say that because you need a real strong will, courage, conviction, study. It's work to understand Bitcoin. And once you do get it, it takes work to keep it. And you learn as you go, but you know, it takes, you know, basically we're warriors at heart. I've often said that. I mean, you know, 10,000 years ago, we had pointy rocks on the end of sticks, and we were trying to knock down woolly mammoths. I mean, that is real. That's not, you know, something made up. And Bitcoin is kind of a beast. When you said that, it reminded me of that. Yeah, exactly.
I think, you know, there's all sorts of people who are in this space. And as much as certain types of people try to monopolize what is the Bitcoin culture, and they try to infuse their morality, their ethics, their political ideologies, even economic ideologies, I think ultimately that we have a really wide spectrum of people involved, and we're all swirling around this protocol of truth, which is oblivious to all of that. And the fact is that there's a little bit of space for everybody. And
even warriors.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I want to do with the account is to make sure that that's reflected on the timeline, is that there's space for everybody within Bitcoin, regardless of who you are. And sometimes that's not always clear, and certain sections and factions of Bitcoin try to make it like it is an exclusive club and gatekeep who is and isn't welcome.
That's I'm gonna just use that as a lead into this discussion.
Looking for a secure, trusted way to buy, sell, and hold Bitcoin? Gemini has been leading the way since 2014. Founded by the Winklevoss twins to be a security-first, fully regulated Bitcoin platform. With Gemini, your Bitcoin is protected with enterprise-grade security, backed by insurance and Type 2 certifications for SOC 1 and SOC 2. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or a long-time hodler, Gemini gives you the tools to stack sats and build generational wealth your way. From simple one-tap buys to advanced charts and trading features, it's all here. Buy, sell, and hold securely. That's Gemini. Gemini. Bitcoin with confidence. Need cash without selling your Bitcoin? With DeBiFi, you borrow against your Bitcoin, non-custodial, multi-sig escrow, and you keep your keys. No banks, no selling. Just institutional grade liquidity with terms up to 2 years and APRs as low as 9%. All transactions are signed using private keys on your own device. Using a 3 of 4 multi-sig setup, 3 out of 4 keys must approve every transaction, giving you control, transparency, and peace of mind. Whether you're a hodler, miner, small business, or treasury team, DeBiFi gives you the cash you need now without giving up your Bitcoin upside or triggering a taxable event. Get liquidity, keep exposure, and stay secure. That's DeBiFi. DeBiFi, your Bitcoin, your money.
I am definitely kind of embroiled in this controversy around Bitcoin's core devs and the op return controversy. Mm-hmm. And this is a great opportunity for me to say something that's been on my mind for like the last 24 hours. And it's an apology. And I'm, one of the best traits that I ever inherited is the ability to say I'm sorry or to admit I'm wrong. I don't have. My pride has been completely humbled in my life. I've had a really interesting life, and it's led me to the point where I'm here and I can be very humble. I don't have to prove anything. So, I took a very adversarial approach to this whole controversy. And in fact, I've said some things about Bitcoin Core that I'm very upset about the way this narrative came out into the public domain, and that I have felt marginalized in it, like my voice doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And really, that's where I should have left that conversation, because that is the core of the core problem, which is that I feel as a Bitcoiner, I'm not stupid. I do read, I do study, I'm constantly challenging myself. I'm learning about this issue, about spam filters and op return and what all this means. I'm learning about running a node, and I have a node now. I am running knots, but I also know that basically that's not the solution, and that may not even be the issue to what this controversy is about. So, I'll just apologize right now to any core developers or anybody involved in maintaining core if I've seemed so harsh in that discussion. And going forward, I'd like to, kind of like what you said, I'd like us to, have a discussion instead of just butting heads here, because there are important things that are coming up, BIP 119 and covenants, and we've got things that we need to talk about. And we're never going to be able to talk to them if there are people like me going, fuck you, I'm not, I'm pissed, that kind of thing. It's not going to work.
Yeah, I think I tend to stay away from technical discussions. Primary reason is because I haven't done the work. And the reason for that is I don't have the time to do the work to have a meaningful impact on that. But also, I don't think it's the place of my account to be wading in on that. We have a very strong, deep, engaged technical community. And as we can see, they're more than willing to battle out all the different viewpoints. Mm. And Bitcoin is decentralized. If one view wins the argument and someone disagrees, you can build out what the option you prefer to see in the world is. Mm-hmm. And I think we do have a community that's vibrant enough that it will work itself out. So let's say a particular solution wins the argument, is implemented, and it's not working. I have faith in the technical community to work out something that will then, solve whatever the issues are. I'm not a technical person. I do see people who think it's their place, or They want to be involved in the discussion where they haven't done the work, because it's, Bitcoin is to be a Bitcoin OG because of its origins from the cypherpunk days, where, technical prowess is an esteemed quality to have. They think that, okay, well, if I want to be part of that, then I've got to pretend that I can also make these arguments. And essentially, they're just repeating whatever their favorite technical influencer has said. It's not really a viewpoint that they hold out of knowledge, out of analysis, out of doing their own work and thinking for themselves. I don't want to be one of those people. And I know deep within my heart, I haven't done the work. So it's not a place for me to wade into one thing or another. I'm not going to put my thumb on the scales just because of the account that I've grown. I'd rather let the people who know better battle it out, and I want that battle to be had. I wish it was done in a more sporting way, but I think that's just the culture of Bitcoin. I don't really like it.
We're back to the battle.
Yeah, I don't really like it. I wish that less personal insults, more rational discussion of objective facts and potential solutions. But, they are who they are. So, yeah, I mean, we can see that people want to have strong opinions. And when there's disagreement, there are certain types of people who are incapable of working through disagreements in a civil way.
I think that's one of the problems, is that, there's been a lot of pushback from people that really aren't understanding that they're causing a lot of conflict that's just unnecessary. And I realize this has escalated to a point where it's just not necessary. But at the same time, what's interesting is I do believe that what you mentioned, this kind of like a conflict or going around Bitcoin is actually healthy for us in the long run. I did have a chance yesterday. I got to a small event with Micheal Saylor and had a chance to ask him a question about this issue, and it was interesting. His take on it. I've kind of, sometimes I disagree with his take on different things, but I think he was right about this, that the response of the community is probably positive, meaning that, we're getting into this conversation and good will come out of it. The other thing he's mentioned is something that you and I have talked about before, which is, the idea of user interface experience, the idea of tweaking and fixing, an endless amount of add-ons to protocols and software often makes that UI almost impossible to interface with or to work. And the constant tweaking of any Bitcoin protocol probably should give you pause.
Yeah. I mean, Saylor is famous for having made his position clear in that regard, right? And I think there was a little bit of a battle with Jack Dorsey pointing a finger at him for having, I guess, subverted the potential for some funds going to Bitcoin core devs or something like that. I mean, I don't know the truth of the matter, but that was the accusation. And then Saylor came out and said, well, actually, should we be giving, funds to people to mess with the protocol when there's, without a governance structure or process in place? And what are we actually messing with, given it's a $2 trillion market cap asset?
I'm 70 years old, bud, and I've got all my wealth in Bitcoin. I mean, everything. And, this was years ago when I realized that Bitcoin is the, greatest monetary invention in the history of mankind. And when I figured that out, I just put all my chips in. And it's very difficult to do that. In fact, I'd have to say, I talked to Fidelity once with somebody, and they told me that this was a secretary to one of the VPs that I was going to meet with. And she said, well, we've never had anybody that has all of their wealth in Bitcoin. And in fact, I didn't have the meeting with him because he was not going to discuss Bitcoin with me. And I wanted to discuss with him kind of a follow-up program to where I was going to go as I make, withdrawals and things like that from Fidelity. I actually own real Bitcoin, of course, too. In fact, I own Strategy and Metaplanet. And, I like to play with those. They're not Bitcoin, but I'm really fascinated by this discussion around leverage. This discussion about building out these Bitcoin Treasury Companies. What does it mean for the business industry, for Bitcoin, for adoption? And, I found, and I don't know if this is true for you, but I found that if I ever invest, if I actually get something, no matter what the quantity is, I start to follow it and study it. And so, it's been a lot of fun for me, but it's not Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the asset. It's Bitcoin. And all these proxies, all these wrappers, all these ETFs are just one-for-one wrappers, and they're like overnight depositories. You don't get to have liquidity in there. You can't access these things. When we see these major crises come up around the world, what do you see? Bitcoin begins to do what all assets do in times of stress. It correlates to one. They all become tied. It's like a de-levering event. There was a really neat chart that came out the other day. I posted it on my feed, but I don't have the access to it, and I don't remember who put it out originally. But what it shows you is that 60 days after those major events where Bitcoin just sells off, 60 days, it's up huge. Every time except once, and I can't remember what it was, but like out of 8 different occasions. So, Bitcoin is the asset. Bitcoin is what my life's built around, and I have great hope for the future.
You have had an interesting life.
Yeah.
And I'm like, given all your adventures, you're an artist, former police officer?
I'm an ex-oil field worker, ex-cop, ex-miner.
Pilot.
Pilot. I drove a cab at night in Denver in 5 Points. I got hired not hired, I actually got in the Navy and went through kind of a neat indoctrination, turning myself into an officer in like 8 weeks with a bunch of Marine DIs. Once I got through that, I was fortunate, I got to fly F-18s, Hornets. That's the plane they had in the last Top Gun movie. It's a really neat aircraft, I'll tell you right now. That's a neat jet. That's just a lot of fucking fun to fly that thing. And then I was fortunate, I got to go into Top Gun, and I came out as an adversary instructor, flew a bunch of older airplanes from the 60s and 70s. I even left one of them out in the desert one day. And I flew for Delta. I ended up flying all over the world. I never went to Prague. I will tell you, Prague is just a beautiful city. I'm enraptured with this place. I ended up having I don't know if you've ever ridden motorcycles. I rode motorcycles for half a century, and every kind of bike you can imagine. And I built a really cool chopper myself, but unfortunately it was deadly as hell. And I had a bad accident, a brain injury. So again, I always say this is another reason to probably not listen too closely to what I say. And this is not financial advice, because you'll notice what I've just said. There's no financial training anywhere in my background. I have no background in finance. The only thing I do is I read, study. I'm interested in learning constantly. And then here I am today. And I'm very fortunate that I'm here today. Like I said, I left a jet out in the desert. And you know what? I had a lot of close calls in the Navy. So I'm grateful for every day I have on the planet. It's like a party. I'm having the best life ever. And it's the Bitcoin life. That's what I'm living.
So it's interesting because just one of those things for most people would be an exclamation mark in their life, right? Like just to have been in the Navy, just to have been a pilot in any capacity, let alone through that. Or tell us about, I'm fascinated, you left the plane in the desert. What happened?
Yeah, and they're really pissed. I'm going to tell you right now, when you take the squadron jet and you go out and then you walk home, it's like, where's the fucking jet? So, this is not a good look in a way. Well, maybe it's a good discussion to have right now. You have a budget that runs in the U.S., a military budget, and we have the largest military budget on the planet, okay? The next 10 nations, we still dwarf them. They're going to raise that this year. They want to raise it $115 billion. It'll be a $1 trillion defense budget.
They're always raising it.
Always.
Bipartisan
We have
support.
five fat boys here that you cannot touch. It's, Social Security, Medicare, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and then you've got the interest expense and Defense Department. And none of those are, they just don't get cut. Anyway, so they give you a budget and you have a lot of money during the year. Well, towards the end of September, that's when the U.S. rolls over. The skipper comes up and he says, hey, we've got a bunch of fuel that we haven't used over the year. And maybe we weren't doing as much dogfighting with the fleet or something like that. And he says, so I need you guys to go out there and burn it up. I'm not making this up. And the reason is because he doesn't want to put in that we didn't use our fuel allotment because...
You get a budget cut.
Exactly. And then next year he won't get the fuel that he wanted, or maybe a little extra to go places. So, it's like take the squadron jet, go to an air show, go do something, go show us the Navy, do some recruiting duty. And I shouldn't say that it's like a DDA mission, like day dick around. We did do day dick around missions, but it's a question of like, 'cause for instance, I took the jet out, I was training. It was basic fighter maneuvers, dogfighting, and at the bottom of the end of the series, I lost control of the aircraft. I heard a clunk, and the plane just went out of control. And then I almost rode it right into the dirt. And I think it was because I had a lot bigger ego then. And, you know, I thought, even out of control, I thought, well, I can fix this. You know, I'm Jethro, I'll solve this problem. But finally, at the very end, I realized that, you know, I wasn't gonna get out of the plane. And then right before impact, I reached down. You have two handles in the Navy to eject from. You've got an overhead handle, which is probably the best one. That's the one I wanted to use. But I realized when I finally understood what was happening, finally pulled my head out of my ass, and I looked, I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna die. I had just enough time to reach between my legs and pull the lower one. And it was on a really fucked up seat. I mean, it was from I was flying a jet from Vietnam. I mean, it's 1967 jet or something. And in the ejection seat, you're sitting on the ejection seat on this aircraft was like a big can of nothing but rocket fuel. Like it was just an explosive charge. It just lit. And so the instantaneous G was like about 160 Gs. I came out of there, I hit something, cracked my canopy, and I ejected, so I went up instead of towards the ground. And then it was boom, plane, seat, and Jethro sitting in the middle of the desert. And the only reason I'm telling you all this story is it's got a funny ending to it. You know, so the whole town, I was out in the middle of the desert in bumfuck Egypt, and the whole town started coming out there. And the first guy that got up there in a pickup truck, he was just jabbering away. You know, I mean, the plane's right there. There's a big hole. It's on fire, and I'm just sitting there. I was dazed. And he's yakking away. I couldn't follow the thing he was saying. And finally, he stopped. And, you know, when he did, Archie, I just kind of looked up at him, and I said, do you smoke? And he said, yeah. I think they all smoked. I said, well, can I have a cigarette? And I smoked that thing down. I was still smoking because I asked him for the pack. I was still smoking when the helicopter came down and picked me up, and they made me put my cigarette out. And I kept the pack with me. And I wasn't smoking at the time. I mean, I had done it years ago, but it was the best cigarette I'd ever had in my life. So, yeah, you know, the point of this is I'm really grateful for where I am today. You know, I love this idea of the Bitcoin life. I don't know if
What's the Bitcoin life?
You and I follow each other, and sometimes I'll post on my X feed what the Bitcoin life is. And I try to do these little clips, you know. And the reason is I'm living the Bitcoin life right now. I'm very fortunate. Mm-hmm. You know, I just happened to be in a place where I understood Bitcoin. I had money that I had built up over a long period of time, and I just put it in Bitcoin. So I'm getting, fortunately, at my age, I'm getting to see a glimpse of what this life is like. And here's what it is. First off, just sitting here like this, I'm relaxed. I'm just having fun talking to you, Archie. I'm having a blast. I don't give a shit what's going on in the world right now as far as a lot of the things that people are concerned about. I worry about my kids, I worry about grandkids, I worry about a lot of things. But what I'm trying to say is I live my whole life. For me, it's just very relaxed. Time is just stretched out for me. I can just relax and look in front of me. I'm a creative person. I can do things that I want to do. I can take up new sports. I just took up scuba diving. And you're not on the hamster wheel. You know, eventually, a lot of the people, everybody listening to this is probably going to be younger than me. You know, if you're a young person, your age right now, and you're stacking sats, you're going to have an incredible life in front of you. If you get married, you have kids, you know, you're not going to have everybody under the roof on a hamster wheel trying to produce income so that you can somehow survive and outrun a printer that's going up every year. And I don't know how to do that. I mean, if you do, tell me, but I don't know how to outrun the printer. Yeah,
it was one of the things when I started working full-time, so the corporate part of my career was I desperately wanted to escape the urgency, the desperation of the morning rush, and then the sort of institutionalized life of sitting at a cubicle. And because when you talk about people, we'll talk about the careers with people, they have a very glamorous way of describing what it is that they do. And sometimes, you know, we work in very glamorous environments, or what appear to be glamorous from the outside. And I've had the fortunate experience of having worked for some of these so-called, you know, desirable large companies. But let me tell you, once you get through that beautiful looking vast lobby, and you make your way up to whichever level you're working on. Sometimes it's right up in the sky, sometimes not so high. You make your way in and through that door, it's all the same cubicle. It's all the same cubicle. And it's either Excel, PowerPoint, Word, email. That's our jobs, right? But when we dress it up with our titles and, whatever else, it just sounds more glamorous. But actually it's quiet desperation is very apt. It was for me, and I couldn't wait to get out of that. And look, it's not a value judgment on people who work for a living. I have the deepest respect for people who dedicate themselves to working to provide for their families and to fulfill their aspirations and all of that. But it was not something I could see myself doing for 40, 45 years. I didn't know of a way out, of a viable way out. The only thing that made it worth my time was because I was a contractor consultant, I'd get paid really well for a short amount of time, and then to counterbalance that period of work, I'd be able to fund quite long stretches of doing whatever the hell I wanted. That was really good for a time. But I didn't realize what I was doing is actually I was slowly making myself less and less employable until just before COVID. I was like, okay, it's been 3 months, that's fine. I'll probably, it doesn't usually stretch more than 6 months, and I'm enjoying my time anyway. And then COVID hit. Okay, what's happening with COVID? The economy shut down. There's no point looking for a role anywhere, right? Waited for the lockdown to open up again, start making calls, start sending applications. Just silence. Mm-hmm. Absolutely nothing. And I didn't think anything of it, to be honest. I was like, okay, it'll pick up. After 3 months of literally nothing, right? I just gave up. And so I'm like, okay, I gave up. And I was oblivious. I said to you that, I'm quite reckless when it comes, I have been quite reckless when it comes to risk, financial risk, entrepreneurialism, whatever. I'm like, yeah, I'll get into it. And I just sort of like, okay, I've got money. I can see out a fair amount of time doing this. And it got to a year and still no plan. During that year, I was trying to buy a coffee shop. I did tell you about that off camera, didn't I? Mm-hmm. So I was trying to buy a coffee shop, and that was kind of my plan. I'm like, okay, well, forget about the corporate world. I will do this coffee shop plan that I told you earlier. I do my writing in the morning, run the coffee shop in the afternoon, and then the evenings are for myself, whatever I want to do, golden hour photography, go to the gym, talk to friends, have some dinner, all that sort of stuff, right? And thank God I missed out on the coffee shop that I wanted, because it turns out that the retail environment, like I was saying to you, has just never recovered from that. It's never recovered. And so what I thought would have been a viable industry for me to work in and a lifestyle that I would have absolutely adored would not have come to fruition. It would have seen sort of that quiet desperation continue in another form. And I see that basically there's a malaise over the UK economy as a result of that, the situation post-COVID, but also mismanagement politically, because you were asking me about that earlier.
Well, think about how unfair this is. Think about the discussion that we're really having. I mean, if you and I zoom out and you heard what I was talking about as far as a Bitcoin life, but think about how unfair it is for everybody that works. Mm-hmm. I told you I worked underground in a mine. I worked, as deep as 2 miles down in the fucking earth. And I mean, it sucks down there. The water is coming out of this drift, that's a tunnel, coming out of the drift on both sides, out of the floor. I mean, it's filled with water, muck, mud, dust. There's, doing explosives down there, so the nitroglycerin, you have constant headaches. So you can work down there for 40 fucking years, and you can be, an upstanding, strong man, and we only had men down there working at the time, and you can spend your life down there in the bowels of the earth, working your ass off and trying to save. You can save as hard as you want, and these pricks, whether it's in the UK or the US, with a click of a mouse click money. Mouse click money. That's from Larry Lepard's book, the Big Print. Great book.
That's a great term too.
Mouse click money. I told him, I said, that's the best I've heard. with a mouse click, they can just destroy everything you save. You can come away with, you could have saved 40% of your salary over the last period of time from COVID, and those fuckers can just wipe it out with a click of a mouse. And that's wrong. And I'm telling you, if you're listening to this, the reason you need to be into Bitcoin is because they can't print that shit. You want to be right now, and we're going to go through a really rough time here. I mean, this is not over. I don't know if you follow, fourth turning theory from Neil Howe or not, but I'm reading that book again right now. And so it's kind of on the forefront of my mind. But, if he's correct, and in 97, they forecast that within like the next 8 to 10 years, they said, we will have a crisis. Well, guess what? That came 2008. So they were right. And if so, then this crisis that was playing out right now. Well, what you need, you've got to find, if you want to protect yourself and your family or build generational wealth, you've got to outrun these pricks. And the only way to do it is you've got to find something that they can't print, that they can't use a mouse click and destroy what you've been working so hard to save.
Well, I hate to say it, but there is a crisis every 5 to 10 years. And we've just clocked up 5 years since COVID. Mm-hmm. So there's something coming.
Well, this theory, if you look at it, is based upon the saculum for, if you think of the ancient Etruscans and Romans, and I love Roman history. I don't know what it is about guys. There's this, and
thinking about the Roman Empire.
Yeah, it's just, guys just like Rome. I mean, whether it's, we could strap on our armor and put on our sword, whatever. I don't know what the hell the problem is, but we like Rome. But anyway, it was kind of based on the idea that the longest lived life somehow separated epochs. And usually that was 80 to 100 years. And, in my country's case, you can actually, you can go back to the Revolutionary War, Civil War, then World War II, and they're based in that particular area. They usually are the end of an era to the start of a new era, which is why World War I didn't really fit within the model of what this, fourth turning is. And, we are at this point. We're right at 80 to 100 years. Actually, we're coming up on that 100-year mark. And this is going to be probably a volatile time. And so people just need to realize that Bitcoin is a beast, like you said, and it's very easy to get shaken out. This is not the time. You should not be trading Bitcoin. If you follow Bitcoin, you realize that this cycle's a little bit different, isn't it?
I have noticed that, and I've asked a few guests about that. Yeah.
This cycle is different, and it is. Volatility has changed, and it's suppressed right now. There's two things to take from that. One, that volatility suppression, it does not mean, like, let's just say, going forward, these Bitcoin Treasury Companies keep piling in. Right now, we're over 100. I mean, and in fact, it's going so fast that I'm having trouble. I can't tell you accurately how many are adopting Bitcoin within Treasury. It's just huge, and it's going to continue. The thing is that most of it's just little minuscule amounts. It's going to continue to grow. Asset allocators of any kind that you can imagine, from pension funds, insurance funds, hedge funds, family offices, they're all coming. Right now, they're dipping their little toe in the water, but they're all coming. And as they come here and this market cap gets bigger and bigger and bigger, it will take more to move this market in volatility. Bitcoin's volatility should be suppressed. That does not mean that Bitcoin's price is going to be suppressed at all. And in fact, I think just the opposite. I think as we come in here and we get more and more people within this tightening compression range, we are going to actually see a lot of upside spikes that are going to just shock the shit out of people, because we are going to set the price on the margin very soon. And when I'm talking about that, what I'm talking about is, if you picture this thing as a Pareto distribution or bell curve, or the right or left side of the risk curve, whatever the fuck you want to use for your term, the bottom line is, when you have a tremendous amount of market activity around buying and selling, where we get to a point where we exhaust that regime. Mm-hmm. And one of those institutions or one of those countries steps in and buys at that moment, that is what I'm talking about. That is what setting the price on the margin means. The other thing I'm going to say is that right now, the Bitcoin volatility is suppressed, unusually so. If you look at something Bollinger Bands, and in fact, I strongly suggest anybody listening that they follow James Check Matey on X. I think you do too. And I actually subscribe to his newsletter, and I'm not pitching it for, I don't get jack. You know, I have no affiliation with any human being on this planet to get money for Bitcoin at all. But what I'm trying to say is he just put out some very interesting information, and it confirms what I'm saying, especially like Bollinger Bands. They're very compressed right now, measuring volatility. That's unusual, and we are going to see a breakout. Now, the funny thing is that Bitcoin likes to inflict tremendous pain. And I would not be a bit surprised if that volatility is initially to the downside, you know, because it loves to, right now, we're like a boat, and people on the short side of the boat, they're standing all over on one side of the boat for when it tips over. But it will recover, and when it does, I think we will see that price discovery in a new range. I think we'll set higher highs very soon.
That 2.5 year channel seems to have some kind of bid on the floor at every price range. Like we're not seeing sharp, profound drawdowns. We're seeing drawdowns, but we've been in this channel for 2.5 years now. And if we don't get a blow off top by the end of the year, I will be 100% convinced that the cycles are that the 4-year cycles are well and truly over. There's just too much that's novel about this so-called cycle, or since the bear market. You know, all-time high before the halving was very novel, never happened before. This persistent bid, the only thing that's holding me off from saying the cycles are definitely over, the 4-year cycles are definitely over. It looks like perhaps a prolonged replication of what happened 15, 16, 17, before the blow off top in 17.
Yes.
It looks like perhaps just an expanded version of that at the moment. And we all know, like, confidence builds slowly, but then it just takes off in a parabola that's reflected in the price. But if we don't get that, that tells me there's something happening in the market structure, because we have new market participants, a different type of buyer that's dominating the market at the moment.
There is a different buyer. You know, originally VanEck, Bitwise, Fidelity put out information. It took a while. I kept looking to try to see in the ETFs, who are the buyers in ETFs? And initially I was surprised. It was almost entirely retail and high net worth individuals. It was as high as 80% projected, but that's changing. It's dropping. The institution, as I said, you know, the institutions, we set up a perimeter wire. We got the flares set. Well, guess what? They just launched. The enemy is within the perimeter. They're amongst us. Well, they are here. They're going to be buying. These nation states are going to be buying. If they've got half a brain cell functioning, whether it's Russia or somebody else, they're never going to tell you. And we are going to have a strong underlying bid. This is a different. The cycle and these stair-step surges is what I call them, are different. And so it'll be interesting. I'm like you. I'm on the fence. I really don't know how this is going to play out, because in the past I followed some different models seen as from 21st Capital, Giovanni Santastasi's power law model, different models that I follow and stuff to try. And I'm always reading on-chain and stuff. But you know what? Things have changed. And we'll see how this plays out over, like you said. I think you've got it right. Over the next year, we should know.
Well, there's a guy called TechDev on Twitter, on X, and he's a really good chartist, and he's been sharing this chart that with an indicator that combines both global liquidity with the business cycle, and we are literally at the bottom of the trend and bouncing up. So it's almost like, it looks like this is the start of a run. However, we're like 1.5x times the previous all-time high, which has never happened before, right? Usually we've been below the previous all-time high when this indicator has shown that it's actually on an upward trend. So, like, it's hard to tell. I think one thing that I learned from the last cycle was that the halving has a greatly diminished effect, if at all, right now. And it looks more and more like global liquidity was the driver all along, and that liquidity cycle has actually extended a little bit, so it's not quite under 4 years, and you can see that's reflected in the Bitcoin price as well. And now that it's swinging up, it looks like this is the start, which is, I find it sort of, I'm a bit reluctant to actually say that, but it looks like this is the start. And then we've got Giovanni's model, which, I really do respect the work that he's done.
I do too.
Right?
He's a prickly son of a bitch, but I do respect his work.
Yeah, he's going to die by that model, absolutely. Like, I respect that he's got total conviction in the scientific work that he's put in the mathematical model, right? I respect that. And I understand what he is saying, that this is almost like a living, breathing system where every single aspect reinforces the other, and one part of it can't overshoot without the other aspects of the Bitcoin ecosystem, the economic model, also developing in a similar way. I respect it. I understand what he's saying. But the price, out of all of the different components that he models, the price is probably the one aspect that can definitely run away and overshoot. And I think he's even said as much. I think his faith is much more around where it comes back down to settle.
Yes.
Rather than placing an upper limit. He does model his upper limit, and he has a view on that. But he said, yes, it can overshoot that, and my model can still be valid if it comes back down and hits the lower bound that I think it will. Yeah. I don't want to misrepresent the guy because I don't want to get into a flame war with him, but I do read some of his posts, and that's the essence of what I've taken from him. But going back to tech dev's sort of liquidity cycle, and I think he combines that with the market cycles to develop an indicator. It looks like if we're at the start of an upswing, could we get 2, 3, 4 multiples of where we are now? I'm like, in the space of 12, 18 months, I think that's very possible. I'm not projecting that, but it's almost hard to believe, isn't it?
It's not for me.
Okay.
It's not for me, and that's why I'm trying to say that do not misunderstand this discussion. When we have to talk about volatility and suppression of volatility and the asset class getting bigger, and things progressing, whether it's onto the Lightning Network, all the things that we're building out. Okay, that doesn't negate where this thing is going in price.
Sorry, can I interrupt?
Yeah, please.
You mentioned Max Payne before.
Yes,
what's maximum pain? You know what I think Max Payne is going to be this time? It's not going to be to the upside or to the downside. It's going to be to the people who think they're going to time the cycle, sell out at the top, and then buy back after an 80% drawdown, and that 80% drawdown never comes.
Never comes.
Yeah, it's going to be like a 60% drawdown, recovery within 6 months rather than the full prolonged 12 to 15 month bear market before it reaches the bottom. And it's going to bounce back, and they're like, no, I'm just waiting because this is not the end. And it's just going to continue surging.
Do you remember the last cycle? There are still people out there that are probably waiting for $12,000 Bitcoin. Hey, guess what? Guess what, jackass? You know what? That's not coming. So
it was a Doomberg guy waiting for $5,000.
Yeah. Go ahead and keep waiting. Enjoy that. How'd that wait work for you? You missed out an opportunity to get an asset. I bought down there at 17,000 feet, or I know why I said that. I bought that at $1,700. And the reason I say that is because I often use the parachute analogy, because I've been in a parachute. But the thing is, if you're in a plane and you and I are together and we're going to go jump that day and you didn't bring a parachute and the plane catches on fire, okay, one of us is going to die. It's not going to be me. You're dying. Because I got my parachute. I bought it. I got 1/10 of a Bitcoin at $1,700, okay? And I actually bought more down there. Well, guess what? These people that are upset because they're waiting for it to go lower, and they're upset now because of unit bias and it's $100,000. Well, tough shit. That's what it is. It's going to $1 million fucking dollars. Are you going to be pissy then? If that plane's on fire, are you going to break the glass if it says you can buy a parachute for 1/10 of a Bitcoin here? It's $10,000. What about if it's $100,000? You're going to break the glass. You're going to get the damn parachute, and as the economy goes tits up, you're not going to sit there and go into the ground. You're going to jump. So, and I want to touch on something you mentioned here. Even though I was using the dinosaur battle, Roman, all these, allegories, you mentioned virus, and I'd actually have to say that is a really accurate way to think of Bitcoin. It is like a virus. It's spreading. And a virus is it's not quite alive and it's not dead. I mean, it lives somewhere, it's in between It's not alive or dead. And it can go for millennia. I mean, 3,000 years, viruses can still come awake and still be here. And Bitcoin is like a virus. It is spreading everywhere. And when you think about it, what is the ideal host? You know, a virus wants to get onto somebody, spread, and live forever. But it doesn't want to kill off its host. And the host for Bitcoin really, in my mind, it's the internet. I mean, it was born at the perfect moment, you know, past everything from the microprocessor to, you know, home laptops to PCs to eCash, you know, Chaumian mints, all these damn things that came along, cryptography. It finally came at the right moment. And it's riding on the back of the internet. Well, why don't you try and shut down the internet right now? You know, I talked to somebody recently, I can't divulge his name because he's Russian, and you know, Putin is going to come to St. Petersburg pretty soon. You know what they're going to do? They're going to shut down the entire internet. No phones are going to work. The internet is going to be shut down for the entire visit while
of St. Petersburg, the city.
Everything.
Yeah.
You will not be able to use the internet. How well do you think that's going to work? What if you did that across the country, across the world? Nobody's going to shut down the internet. And here's another thing. Bitcoin is such a fucking virus now that you could shut down the internet. And you know what? You'd start it up 3 days later, and you know what happened? Blocks would just start sinking. It's in space now. It's on everybody's laptop.
Yeah.
I've got a node. I just start syncing up with a network, and you know what? It means nothing. Shut it down for 3 days. So, you know, this thing is unstoppable. It is a beast.
All we need is one node somewhere as a flickering flame in space, and Bitcoin will persist.
That's a great analogy, a flickering flame. And so, you know, if you're a pleb out there and if you haven't made money on this last cycle, I mean, I don't know what the fuck you're doing. And, you know, you're going to make more money going forward. And, you know, use that money, get a node, run a node, start to study this knots versus core controversy and choose your side or don't choose a side, but just run what you think is correct. You know, all these other people I don't know if you got a chance to get out to the conference, but you know, it's loaded with these little BitX miners, you know. People make fun of those. I've got one in my studio.
Why would they make fun of those?
Because
I would have thought that was such a strong symbol of sovereignty and the ability to participate in a network regardless of how small you are. You know, we always say it doesn't matter how big your stack is as long as it's important to you that you have an allocation. Why would they make fun of something like a BitX?
You know, the thing is that if you look at the economics behind it or the chances of winning a block, it's very small, okay? But the thing is, what you hit on, that's the key. This is a way to support the network. And again, you know, one of the biggest threats that we have right now on our horizon is this concentration of mining pool authority over the templates, you know, the template creation, because they run their own nodes. And Satoshi did not think about this. This was not something that they planned for. Where we're sitting right now today in the Bitcoin community is not necessarily healthy. And you can fix that. You can do something about it. You can run these little BitX, buy a bunch of them, buy 4 or 5 of them.
Well, they're winning blocks.
Occasionally they have won blocks. Yeah. You know, when I go in the studio, what do you think I do? I go over to my little BitX miner, and I look down there and I wait for it to see, because it's got a little miner. He runs across the screen, he's chipping away on a little piece of the rock, you know, and then suddenly it'll come up and says blocks 1, and when it says 0, I go, oh well, whatever. But yeah, I like to do that. It's fun.
Like a lottery ticket, isn't it? And with better chances of winning. With better chances of winning, yeah.
Better chances. Yeah. And not only that, the thing is, here's what the key of this is, and I say go farther. Like if you're right, and let's say that this cycle continues and we see these multiples, which I think we will, and you have 2 to 3 or 4 times where we're sitting right now, okay, guess what? Take some of that money, get these BitX, get your hand in it, get a real miner too if you want. Start directing it to a mining pool that is morally and ethically aligned with who you are as a Bitcoiner. That, for me, that's Ocean, and I'm just making up, not a plug here, I'm just mentioning them. And then the other thing is...
tell us why.
Well...
Because that's is it Luke's and Jack's... mining pool, right? Well, yes. They founded that.
Yes.
Anyway.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. This is why this is so important. these mining pools, right now, I can tell you that we have 6 to 7 mining pools, and some of them will look like they're different, but they're not. You know, they're basically Chinese. If you look at these mining pools, right now they are controlling, 80 to 90% of the hash rate. That's scary. The other day I saw across the blockchain on the mempool, I saw 8 blocks, all mined by the same company, all in a row. That's not good. We need to fix that. And the problem is this, the way this system has evolved is the miners that are hashing, they're not sending their hash rate to a node that they have themselves and they're building a template. That was the original model that was used. They are now sending them all to these pools. And these pools have their own templates that they're creating. Who's going to be in a block? I just did a transaction today with Bitcoin, gave somebody some Bitcoin, and I sent it on chain. So I sent it out there. I expect it to be in the block, but guess what? If these miners control the creation of these templates, my transaction never has to get in there. What if I'm flagged by OFAC and they say that this guy Jethro's he's bad. We demand that you not include his transactions in a block. All I'm trying to say is this centralization and movement away from those template creations, the ability to do it yourself or to use, the reason I use Ocean is they allow me to use certain template creations that I agree with, that I'm comfortable using. You'll have to do you have to do your own research on this and find out what you think works for you. But this is a great time right now for all these people to get involved in this space. And BitAxe is a great idea, or BlueAxe. It's a great idea. Get behind these companies. I support them and help the network.
We were talking about these guys who are waiting for 5K. and I just remembered because one of the lessons for me from the last cycle was that macro is really interesting, but they're never going to tell you when to buy and sell. They're like, macro in and of itself won't inform you of that. I know some people, they read the interest rate cycle very accurately last time, and they had a conviction about what was about to happen, and they sold at the top. But then on the way down, they were telling stories. Macro is essentially narrative, and that's why it's so interesting, is because anyone can have an opinion as long as it makes sense.
Opinions are like assholes.
Exactly.
Everybody's
We've all got them,
one.
right? And they're interesting because quite often the narrative is filled with esoteric knowledge, and we feel like they're educating us and illuminating the market landscape and relieving us of our ignorance. So we feel like we're more well-equipped to make a decision on what to do with our money. But actually, it turned out that they were kind of right about the direction of interest rates at the top, what would happen, but completely mistaken about the fact that we were about to hit a bottom. But the chartists, many of those, they picked the top some of them picked the top. Almost all of the good ones that I was following picked the bottom within 3 or 4 months, whereas the macro doomers were still saying there's more to come, and all the while the market's running up. And so from 15 to 25,000, the macro guys were still saying, hold off, we're not out of the woods yet. And the chartists are saying, bear market's over. What are you talking about? Like, it's done. Like,
you can't time Bitcoin. You should not time Bitcoin. Let's put it this way. That's not quite correct. I tell you, I do a lot of on-chain. I follow people, and including James Check. So he has said in the past that he believes if you're really astute at this, you can stack more Bitcoin by buying, like in DCA method, meaning maybe 15 to 20% more Bitcoin than you would if you just cut a constant everyday type of a DCA program. So I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is Bitcoin traditionally has traded in a very narrow band, about 3% either direction, 40% of the time. So majority of the time it's right in the middle. And about 30% of the time it's going up, 30% down. We know from being Bitcoiners that most of the time we bet on that 30% rising, that's where we see the majority. Over time, if we look at it, we say, hey, all I have to do is put the chart in a log form, and it's very obvious to me which direction this damn thing goes. But trying to time it into these micro cycles or small cycles and stuff is very difficult. You can tell by what I just said, the odds are against you. What you need to do is buy Bitcoin, hold Bitcoin, and you're set. And there will be a day you'll never have to sell a fucking sat if you don't want to. You will be able to just keep your Bitcoin in perpetuity. It's coming. I mean, we've already seen...
It's almost here. I was speaking to Max K, who's the founder of DeBiFi, Decentralized Bitcoin Finance. Great guy, right? And not just him, there are more and more finance options coming out. And so those options are already in existence, and they're going to proliferate, and there's going to be an abundance of products. One of them will suit your requirements. And soon, I don't know, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, but we're going to have a very rich ecosystem of Bitcoin-backed lending.
And those rates are going to drop. That's the other thing. Right now, 12 to 14%, that's not doable. I'm not comfortable, with that kind of a loan rate. But guess what?
I said that to... do you know Mark Moss?
Yeah, of course.
I met him. He came in. He was kind enough to come in.
Yeah.
We had a great conversation about that because, I like people with strong opinions.
Yeah.
We had a bit of back and forth about that. He seems to think private money should be priced around about that. And I guess I'm only thinking of it as a consumer. I'm like, hang on, if I get a mortgage-backed loan, it's much cheaper, and that's my basis for comparison. But he's an entrepreneur, and he's got a lot of experience in this space as well with respect to lending. So I really valued having that discussion with him. So he seems to think 12 to 14%. It's not too bad.
I disagree entirely. I totally disagree with that. I think going in the future, we will see, it's not going to be the next year or two, but going in the future, as Bitcoin is both adopted, as the virus spreads, as Bitcoin becomes ubiquitous across all financial products, we are going to see it treated for what it is. And that means it will be the most, we often say pristine, the best unencumbered, pristine capital that the planet's ever seen. And when it does that, we will see it priced at SOFR, the overnight funding rate, which is probably around 4.5%, plus 1 or 2%. That will be reasonable. In my mind, and all I'm saying is I disagree with that, and I do think that those rates are going to come down. And it's just a question of building out and spending and the time. So there will be a time when you will be able to lend. And if I asked you, you're pretty well versed in this space, do you think that Bitcoin is going to go up on an average greater than 6% over the next 10 years?
Sure. I think that's almost
exactly.
Short. Yeah.
Exactly.
The adoption cycle seems to be accelerating, and everything that we sort of dreamed about happening 5, 6, and perhaps the people before me up to 10, 11 years ago, all of those sort of projections are coming true. Gradually, and it's just a question of how quickly those sorts of products come onto the market, how quickly the market starts recognizing Bitcoin as a superior form of collateral, and the fact that my personal view is it lowers the risk profile of a loan.
Exactly. I think I think you nailed it right there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because I think, for example, if you over-collateralized a loan, like a mortgage, for example, I was talking to Sam Callahan the other night about this. If I want to buy $1 million home and I put up $1 million worth of Bitcoin, the risk to that loan is virtually zero. I wouldn't even say virtually, it's zero. I'm never going to default
because of
on
duration.
That. The bank is never going to make a loss on that loan. Never, ever. If I fail to make any repayment, the bank not only has the house as a collateral, but it's got my Bitcoin as collateral as well. And what they can do is, even if I was a delinquent on the loan, they could liquidate Bitcoin and bring it back up the balance. And the good thing for the borrower is you've got exposure to $2 million worth of assets that can appreciate. Whereas if you have $1 million in cash, right? Or okay, you're going to put up they'll probably take $100,000 or $200,000 deposit, right? But you still only got exposure to $1 million asset for price appreciation. Whereas with Bitcoin, you're basically taking your chips and you're saying, give me another $1 million, and you're putting that on the market. You have beneficial ownership. You've doubled the beneficial ownership of your asset base and your exposure to a market. So instead of just Bitcoin going up or just the house going up, you've got exposure to both assets going up. And I think if there's a financial institution that can enable that, I'd happily put my Bitcoin up and say, give me a house, I'll pay the mortgage. And if I can't, just take it out of my stack.
And if you follow CJ Constantinos, you know that this is the future. This is where this is going. You build that company.
Who is he? I don't know who he is.
I'll try and give you a link to him on Twitter. He's a really good follow because, that's a strong case for, in fact, he's making that case already. And that comes from the fact that he bought a house, not, I don't know how long ago it was, for 100 Bitcoin. So, and let's take that conversation to the next level. What is the opportunity cost for investments today? If you come to me, and I have a lot of trouble with this because, if I'm approached by somebody as an enterprise or a VC, somebody that's trying to build something, and I have to look at it from the sense of what is the opportunity cost of whatever I'm investing into your product? What is the hurdle rate? What do I need? And what's that in a Bitcoin world? I mean, it's got to be north of 40%, right now. Got to be. Probably a lot more. So how do you somehow value things going forward in that world? I think that will be something we have to address. I really admire the people that are in this space that are making investments and putting back, using Bitcoin investments into these companies because they're really building out a system. They're like more than entrepreneurs, they're almost like visionaries. And there are many people in the space that are doing that. So we will all benefit from it going forward.
There are a lot of people who are early investors in Bitcoin. Thankfully, they are actually funding a lot of the development of these new Bitcoin enterprises. So Willy Woo, I spoke to a couple of months back, and he's been a very successful trader and early Bitcoin investor as well. He's like, yeah, I want to liquidate all of my Bitcoin and support Bitcoin companies as startups, as investments. And that will be my exposure to Bitcoin and supporting the ecosystem and everything. So that's incredible conviction in the success of the space, right? That's a different way. And he's got a background as an investor as well, as a technology entrepreneur / investor. Of course, most of us, we know him as, the on-chain newsletter guy as well. And, famously, he had a spectacular newsletter in the last cycle that he sort of pulled the plug on. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And I'm meeting more and more people who are not liquidating their Bitcoin, but using their Bitcoin wealth to invest in companies and the ecosystem.
One of the neatest things about this, one of the things that attracted me to Bitcoin is because if you look at the Bitcoin world, it attracts the best and brightest and very moral, ethical people, hardworking. It's like you're surrounded by people that you envisioned when you were young and that you were hoping would be in a world that you wanted to populate. They're often enthusiastic. They're pushing the boundaries. Sometimes they're, doing the animal spirits thing. But, they're just good people. And, I have a vision for the world on the Bitcoin standard that's just such a beautiful place. And, one of the reasons, I know you work out. I work out every day. I lift just about every day of my life.
What do you do?
I lift weights. I eat a lot of meat.
Yep.
That's why we were given these teeth, and I obviously have a gold tooth. And there's a neat story behind that too. You have to work very hard to knock out a gold tooth, but when you do, and I mentioned this. I was talking to Larry Lepar the other night. The dentist didn't want to put it in. I guess people just don't have gold teeth anymore.
Not anymore. No.
But years ago they used to. If you talk to your parents,
I remember uncles and aunties who had gold teeth.
Exactly. Even grandparents and stuff, gold teeth. And he asked me 3 times. On the 3rd day, when he was ready to put it in, the last time he said, "Are you sure you want this gold tooth?" But it reminds me that I'm alive today, and I'm very happy. But what I'm going to say is that, the people in this space and where we're going, this world that we're building out here, and why I work out, and I eat really well, and I stretch, I do cardio, every day I work out. There's a great book. You don't need it right now, but eventually, I want you to remember this. There's a wonderful book to read. It's called Younger Next Year. And it was originally written mainly for men, especially past the age of 50. And you can follow that, and you can be like me. You can be sitting here 70 years old. I can still go around and kick some major ass. And I feel good. I mean, I do everything I want to do. I'm having a great time in life. And then the other thing is, I'm trying to, mentally, I'm trying to keep myself alert and involved in things. But I just want to get back to the people that are out there that are young right now and stuff, because this world that we're building out is just going to be so incredible. As Bitcoin spreads further and further through this planet, we are going to find so many ways to do things that we didn't even think were possible. You're going to have a tremendous amount of wealth someday. You could start a FIAT Mint like a bank, almost like the Medici Bank, from the 1400s or 1300s. You could, with other trusted patriarchs, or however you want to call them. I can't remember what they call them there, but
benefactors.
Exactly. That's it. And so you could be that. You could go. You could change one village, one region, one particular area, an island. You could change that whole world for everyone there, and do it while still preserving all your wealth and having a family, doing all the things you want to do,
and being alive to see it.
Yes.
I have something in mind, but
well, go ahead.
No. I don't want to talk about it, but that's precisely the vision I have in mind. Like, a great coffee is my luxury. I don't need much more than that every single day, other than the time to do the things that I want to do. Right? Like I dress with pretty basic clothes. I don't really have a need for anything fancy. I do like nice things, but I don't need them. You see what I mean?
Yes.
And some of those nice things are surely expensive, right? Like what I built out here, it's cost me a fortune, right? But I'm happy to spend money on that. It's not a flex. It's not something I walk around and showing people, right? It's something that, this is the reason why I spent all that money on this. And, it's great that I get to give these two guys an opportunity to build their careers as well, and hopefully we build something together that can reward us all. But that's I'm hoping this generates something that gives me the opportunity to try newer things and bigger things that will eventually allow me to do some of the things that you just mentioned, like become a benefactor for the people who matter to me, both the sort of family, friends, culture. Yeah. Let
me tell you something that I have learned in a long-lived life, is that everything that you own possesses a part of you. And I like watches. I'm really into watches. I can't help it.
What's your preferred brand?
This one, this is a Holzkern from Austria. And the reason I like those is because they incorporate natural products in them, wood. This is zebra wood from Africa. But what I'm going to tell you is this, okay? When you have something like that, and I say it owns a piece of you, like a possession, it's your time. For instance, I have another one that needs to be wound. So I have to put that in a winder, and it runs around there. What's something I have to do? This thing has to be eventually sent in to get a new battery. You take that to the next level, and you start talking about all the possessions that you can own, whether it's a car, a home. I'm going to end up getting back into flying soon, and there's an old biplane that I'm interested in, a type of biplane that I want to start flying. But that's going to take time out of it possesses a part of my soul and the things that I do. So you need to choose carefully as you go through life. And if you do it right, you'll end up with that time that you still have, and you can do all those you're a creative person. You can do the things that you're interested in, whether it's woodworking, welding. I love welding. Whether it's, art, like I do, or photography. I met a photographer the other day. He's gifted. And to do the things you want to do, that is coming. It's coming for everybody, but you have to be careful. Your time, health is greater than wealth. I mean, because if you wake up tomorrow and you have a diagnosis that you did not expect, your world will change forever. And money can buy you things, but those things possess part of you. And they talk about happiness. It can buy you a lot of peace of mind. The greatest gift that I was ever given was to find somebody that I truly love and that I want to spend the rest of my life with. And she is my partner, my friend, my best friend. I believe that I don't know if you're spiritual or not, but I think that she was sent to me, and that I have a tremendous responsibility for that gift that was given to me. And she treats me like a king. I mean, she treats me, I am the master of the house. And that's a pretty cool thing to have. And I've mentioned this before, some jackass out there will think, oh, that's a really stupid thing to say. Or maybe they'll think something less of her. I mean, this gal is gifted. She is much smarter than I am. She's in the medical practice and stuff, but she still treats me like I am a king, like I'm the master of the house. And she's said that in front of our kids. And they cringe. They hate that, when she says something like that. But it's the neatest thing to find somebody that you can go through life with. So you can end up sitting here someday, and everybody watching this right now, you will be me someday. You'll be sitting here. You'll be 70 years old, and if you're lucky, you're going to be ready to go out and kick some ass, take names, write up after action reports. You're going to have the things that you're doing that you want to do, and you're going to have somebody that's side by side with you, and hopefully a great spread out family that drives you nuts sometimes, but you wouldn't trade for anything.
You said something about be careful about what you buy because it will also own a part of you. Have you ever made a significant purchase that you came to regret because of that?
Endless. I mean, where would I start?
Somewhere.
Where would I start? A certain home that I thought was so beautiful and turned out to be just a fucking nightmare because I hadn't thought things out. I never really understood how much it would take for me to maintain that. An old car that was, I like to go fast, so I had an old muscle car, and the thing was fast, but it was also rickety, and it just constantly took work for me. And, I don't mind devoting time and work to the things that pay off in life. Raising children, being that person. Every day when I get up, I look in the mirror and, I have 4 principles that I try to get through the day with: honor, strength, integrity, and kindness, those things. And I often fail, usually in kindness, again, core, I apologize. But I try to learn from that to get to be a better place and stop making those same mistakes over and over again. So, and we should say something right now. I'm often a village idiot, and so if anybody thinks this is financial advice that I've given today, you can tell I don't have a background in finance. I just study. That's all.
No. We're just chatting, and I think that comes across on camera as well. We're just two guys chatting, right? Sharing experiences, and I have this 2 parts of my brain where I do really appreciate very fine things, but I have a great reluctance to become attached to anything material. So I don't want to buy anything I can't give up. And I don't want it to become too much of a part of how I project the world, my self-image. Because I don't want to rug pull myself, you see. I don't want to walk around with a flashy watch and driving a flashy car and having to feel the necessity to update my wardrobe constantly with the latest collection and whatnot. I don't want to feel like that is an image I have to keep up just to maintain my own self-image. I don't want that. I feel like that's more of a burden than something I would enjoy. It would be like a pressure to maintain that. I would much rather occasionally dress up like that, occasionally hire a car and drive out in town or whatever. And the watch part I'm not so concerned about. I started taking a particular interest in watches about 3 years ago. And, I learned all about sort of the pedigree of some of the brands and why they had the standing they did. And then what I found was, after about 3, 4, 5 months of ogling some of the most expensive watches in the world, I realized that I had a really simplified taste in watches, and the simpler, the better. And the watch that I sort of fell in love with, after a few months, that diminished, it faded away. And then I realized, okay, so I do fall in love with the aesthetic nature of the beauty of a watch, right? And I like that. But I don't think it will ever be worth me buying a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 watch, because it's a consumable to me. It's not something, like, I don't look at a watch in the same way a lot of people do, whereas it's like, this is a legacy item that I want to leave for generations and generations. For me, it's a consumable item, and I would never pay more than $500 to $2,000 or $3,000 for that.
There you go.
top end, maximum, right? So I'm like, okay, so what does that mean? So there are a lot of independent watchmakers out there, sort of smaller studio watchmakers. And if it's aesthetics that I want, well, there are actually a lot of really beautiful watches. And if you put them side by side with the most expensive watches, you wouldn't necessarily know which one was worth more, because there are some really low-key luxury brands that nobody's ever heard of, and they're like 100, 150, 200,000. Whereas most people are familiar with, the holy trinity of Swiss watches, right?
But there's such a great lesson learned in what you just said. I mean, think about what you're really saying. When you say you can apply that across your life and your lifestyle, you're really talking about the basics of what we say is a life well lived. A life well lived involves friends, it involves families, it involves experiences, it involves maybe travel, it involves memories. Everyone in this room right here, and I know that this might not be the nicest note to end on, so we won't, but nonetheless, everyone here is going to die.
We're all going to die.
We're all going to die. Everyone's going to die.
Yep.
I can see that horizon out there, on my horizon. Everyone dies. But the thing is that when you do go, and when you go down there and meet the boatman and you cross the river Styx, there's none of this stuff is going to go with you. My watch isn't going to go with me. And, none of that stuff. All I'm going to leave behind is memories, and maybe, I had somebody come up today at the conference, a young man from Sweden. He was a skateboarder, and he kind of reminded me of my son, and who was a skateboarder. And, he just said the nicest things about, what I had done for him. That's what you leave behind. And that's the most important thing.
I'm glad you touched on that. I think legacy is an important thing. It really is. But I think in this community, we focus too much on what we leave behind and not enough of being really nice people now. I mean, there's too much sort of misanthropic behavior. There is. I mean, I haven't detected that from you, but I take your word for it.
All I'm saying is that I think the other day I had a major rant against Core, and the good news is you can learn from that. But go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's not an interruption at all. But I just think there's too much sort of misanthropic behavior in the Bitcoin space, and they sort of write that all off with, oh yeah, we have a low time preference, and I'm leaving a legacy and whatever. It's like, actually, that's not an excuse for being a prick right now. It really isn't. And who cares? The sands are going to bury us all. What's really important is what your impact is today. And are you improving anyone's day, anyone's life right now? And if you're not, that's not a substitute, right? Fantasizing about how you might be remembered, we're all going to be forgotten.
Yes. Yeah. Deep thoughts there. The sands of time. And, I can look back on history, and I can, I love history, and, there are so many great moments in history that define us as a human race. But the bottom line is, it's our moment now. It's this time now. And that's why I just cannot emphasize enough how, if you're into Bitcoin right now, maybe there are a lot of new people that are coming into this space, and they're very upset by the fact that this thing's chopping around like they're bored to shit, and they don't understand what's going on, and people are still getting out of Bitcoin when they shouldn't. Again, you can't time or trade this, and you are at that moment in history. It might feel late, but it's not. Everybody feels like they're late.
We all do, yes.
Max Kaiser said he was late because he felt late at times because he didn't get it at 25 cents or something.
Adam Backer said the same thing.
Exactly.
He came to Bitcoin at 2013. He is the first person Satoshi emailed.
I know.
And didn't buy Bitcoin. Right? I had a chat with him yesterday. He's fantastic. I'm so happy to have met him. Yeah, it was my first time talking to Adam. And you just let him go because you feel like you're a passenger in a time machine with him, because he was literally there day one, and he was one of those guys, passionate about not just what is Bitcoin now, but cryptography back then, technology that led up to it, and the history of all the trials and tribulations of various experiments before that. And you get a glimpse into actually what people were thinking And right now, Bitcoin is a $2 trillion market cap asset. And we tend to mistakenly assume, oh, so like he published a white paper and there was just a big bang of interest. And then of course that's how it happened, right? Because we're so enamored with it, we're so excited by it.
And think about what you just said.
And it was a whimper.
2 trillion.
And I asked Adam, I said like, you know, because I consider myself an entrepreneur, a failed one up until now, to be honest, but like the hardest thing to do is to get the attention of your potential users. And I'm like, how did Satoshi get his first 100 users? Who were they? Because if he's sending a white paper to like such a concentrated mailing list of cypherpunks, you think like the ideal audience, and they were like, whatever.
Yeah. Can you imagine that?
Yeah. Right. And he was just like, yeah, and as it turns out, there was another gent called Matey Malmy.
I know that name, but
he's one of the earliest Bitcoiners as well, like a true OG. Apparently, Satoshi and he were also sort of exchanging emails and like conspiring about how do we get people to just start using this to demonstrate its efficacy, and like, does the software actually work and can it scale and all that sort of stuff. And so like even Satoshi was bootstrapping, all right? And we look at where it is now, and that's why Bitcoin could have just died. It could have just been ignored.
It could have. I agree with you 100%. Yeah. You know what? I'd have to say it's interesting you said that, because it's one of the things that I had to deal with when I talked about putting all my chips in, is I had to really understand, did I think that this thing could fail? I can tell you today that I do not think Bitcoin itself is going to fail. And if I mentioned threats earlier, what I'm talking about is if we want Bitcoin to be what it is, we've got to work for it. I mean, we do have to fight to get to that end game of where we want it to be. And there are going to be controversies come up. There are going to be governments that are going to try to fix rails around this thing. You know, I'm concerned about government possibly seizing someday Bitcoin. You know, we have to be willing to deal with these issues, and if you can get your head around it, then yes, you can go all in. Otherwise, you will get shaken out. You mentioned these OGs. You know how many OGs probably still have their coins, their original coins from that period? I bet it's like less than 1%. And the reason is because imagine the volatility that we were facing in the last cycle. You remember what a pain in the ass that was? It was painful. You know, I remember laying in bed at night at 3 o'clock in the morning and going, oh my God, what the fuck have I done? You know, that woman who thinks I'm the greatest thing in the world, you know, she's there asleep and she's trusting me. She trusts me to do the right things. And, you know, I've got us all in this magic internet money. And, you know, none of my buddies, I mean, nobody my age was into Bitcoin then. And I don't even know if they are now. And so laying there at 3 o'clock in the morning when these pull downs, you know, going through a 76, 80% drop in Bitcoin. You know, count your lucky stars that we're seeing these 20, 30, maybe 36% drawdowns so far. And those people that went through at the very beginning, when they weren't even sure it would make it, and you know, you're seeing, you know, an appreciation of 100x. Are you going to keep on to that Bitcoin? People sold constantly. And people lost their coins. We know that. I mean, you know, if Bitcoin's a nickel and you got 5 of them on a computer, you don't give a shit if you throw the hard drive away. That's why all these coins, many of these coins haven't moved. They're never going to move unless something moves them. And I don't want to talk about quantum or anything. But I'm not worried about that threat right now.
I mean, you're absolutely right. And it's one of those reasons why I've never felt any kind of jealousy or envy about the people who came before me and who stacked a whole bunch. It's more admiration from my end because I didn't deserve it. I heard of Bitcoin in 2011, 2012, 2013.
Same.
And I dismissed it. I wasn't even, like, I understood the concept of it, but I dismissed it as, oh yeah, that's interesting, and who's to say that anything's going to come of that, right? And so imagine the risk that these people took back then to have the conviction. And some people, they developed the conviction very quickly that this was definitely going to take off, and they could have been wrong, right? They dedicated a significant amount of their capital at an early time in a highly speculative asset, which had a long history of previous incarnations that had all failed. How can I be jealous of these people? They took it. That takes courage and conviction to do that. And I clearly I didn't have it back then. So
you know what? Take that conversation to the next level too, and talk about what you mentioned earlier. You mentioned about, or I did. I discussed the fact that CJ had put down like 100 Bitcoin for a house, and then take it to Laszlo. 10,000. We just had pizza day recently. 10,000 Bitcoin. You know, that's $1 billion. You know, $1 billion fucking dollars. And guess how many times? Most people don't know that are going to listen to this. You know how many times he did that year? 10.
Oh, did he?
10 times he spent Bitcoin like that. So
wow.
Why did he do it? Because, you know, he was building for a future. He had faith that he wanted to bootstrap this thing. You know, these people that were early and had true conviction and worked in this system, you know, not only do I not begrudge them anything, I am grateful. I'm grateful, just like I'm grateful for every day to be alive now, I'm grateful for these people. And I hope someday, you know, people look back at this time when you and I talk like this, and like that young man today, if it helps anybody out there, to remain convicted as this volatility goes up and down, because things will not always remain like it is. I mean, we are going to have some periods in front of us. And if I'm right about a fourth turning, they could be some really nasty periods that we go through. You have to have conviction and, you know, protect yourself, obviously. But, you know, you will get through it.
I want to ask you that's something that's particularly germane to our audience, because, you know, it is 85 to 90% male. And I think, you know, there's been a huge discussion about a crisis in masculinity, which in some respects it's kind of been overblown, but I think there is merit in that.
I do too.
I think a lot of young men don't really understand what it means to be a man. You've lived a life that sort of, I guess, a hyper-masculine pursuits. Fighter pilot, motorcycle, police officer, mining. I mean, these are, you know, deeply sort of masculine, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. I guess, yeah, they are deeply masculine pursuits, right?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, from your perspective as my elder, what is your idea of masculinity? And the reason why this idea popped into my mind is because of what you said your wife or partner, how she refers to you as the master of the house, and for example. So, and when you told me about waking up in the middle of the night thinking about your responsibility to her, I really wanted you to expand on that, because my idea of masculinity is to become as powerful as possible, to bestow an umbrella of protection upon the people that you love and care about, not to dominate them. But I think being a domineering person has become some people's idea of what it means to be a masculine person, and I think that's gravely mistaken. So I wanted to sort of pose that to you and get your opinion.
I would strongly push back against that argument. That's got nothing to do with masculinity. You know, this is kind of a deep discussion. Ultimately, at the end of a life, I mean, I want to do the right things in life. And as I mentioned, you know, honor, strength, integrity, kindness. These are like my guiding principles. That's got nothing to do with either being strong or maybe hyper-masculine or dominating or a space or great achievements. Sometimes it's just quiet moments. You know, as we go through our life, you never know how you affect another human being. You can actually do things, it surprises people, but you can say a few things to somebody and it will affect their life. They actually can remember it, maybe to the day they die. And unfortunately, it's sometimes a very negative thing that takes place. And you, as a man, you know, you have a duty to live life. You have a responsibility to do the right thing. And if you don't know what that is inside, then you're missing something. You have not thought things through. If you can't look in a mirror and say, what is the right thing to do here? You know, and I can give you examples that, you know, involve certain things, but that will never help you. At the very end of your time, again, you are the one that looks in the mirror. I know for a fact that I have done some really bad things in my life. I mean, things I can't talk about. And I am, you know, ashamed of those things. But at the same time, I've always tried to learn. I've always tried to say to myself, you know, I can do better. And at the end of your life, if you live that principle, and it has nothing to do, you know, one of the reasons why I was involved in all these, I don't know, hyper-masculine pursuits or whatever, was just because sometimes I didn't know what the fuck I wanted to do in life. You know, I was doing different things. And in those days you could. You didn't have to go to school, get a degree, and find your little narrow path or whatever the fuck it is. You could do different things and reinvent yourself. I reinvent myself today. But getting back to that idea, you know, you need to be in a place where you have done enough introspective thought process so that you know what is right. And you know, like I told you about, you know, my partner, my friend, my best buddy, you know, I don't let my dick run around or guide my principles, and I don't, you know, I treat her, you know, just like she treats me that way. Well, guess what? She is my queen. I treat her the same way. The other day we went out somewhere and I opened the door to my truck for her, and, you know, I help her in and out and, you know, I give her the respect that she deserves and treat her that way, so I'm worthy of that. You know, if you want to feel good about yourself, you've got to do the things that make you feel worthy. Like at the end of the day, am I worthy? And don't do things to people that, you know, are going to negatively impact them. And if you do, like I do all the time, like I screw up, you know, the kindness part, then just try to learn from it. And if you make a mistake, just go like this, you know what, I'm sorry. Don't do the I'm sorry, but, you know, like, but I was tired. Just say, you know, I'm really sorry. I just fucked up there. I don't know if that answers your question.
Beautiful. No, it's perfect. I think there's a humility in your answer that I think a lot of people can tap into. We've gone through a period, I think a lot of young men right now have grown up in a period where their education system, perhaps their fathers have been absent, perhaps the education system has been punishing their expressions of masculinity as they're growing up, their competitive nature, you know, the sort of the hazing sort of culture that we have as boys, you know, we're very competitive, we challenge each other, we poke and prod and all that sort of stuff, right? Okay. And I think there's been a strong pushback against that, and I think an overcorrection, right? Because if you're a young boy and basically the signaling you're getting from society is everything you do as a boy is wrong, be more like the girls. And look, we, as young men and boys growing up, we could definitely learn from, you know, the fairer sex, absolutely. And I think I have learned quite a bit, but I'm seeing quite a lot in the online space of an overcorrection.
Yeah.
And a misapprehension about what it means to be a man, what it means to be a powerful man. And then once you acquire that level of power over yourself, how to actually exercise that power. I don't want to name anybody in particular, not in our space, but in the broader space. I don't want to name anyone in particular, but it seems like, you know, the more women you can get, the more flashy things that you can own, the more of a man that you are, according to these. And I just think it's just grossly misguided. I think masculinity is about the protective umbrella that you can provide over the people that you love and who are dear to you. And if you can't do that, well, then work on being able to do a better job of that.
Well said.
Yeah. Let's talk about art.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
I'm fascinated. Like I said to you, I'm a creative soul.
You are.
It's one of the reasons why I love art.
You have to look at my art. Just type my name in the Google. Yeah. I'm the first thing that comes up. And then don't just use the image. Go to my website. That'll actually have some images too.
Yeah. George, I have to ask you about art because in my soul, I feel like I'm a creative person. And I wish I had more time to dedicate to some of my passions. I feel like, you know, art was something that I discovered and consoled me in the lowest times that I had. I discovered a love for writing, for example. I discovered a passion for photography. I've always loved comedy and writing comedy and jokes in that regard. Which is one of the reasons why I absolutely love, I was saying, I just love Carla and Walker, whom you know quite well. Because when they burst onto the scene, I thought, oh, thank God, we're getting a little bit of humor and culture into the scene. And, they're just so good at what they do. But one of the things that not many people know, they also gave me the chance to collaborate with them on one of their skits. And I really enjoyed what they made of that, and the fruits of what we worked on together. And I can't wait to do that again with them. But you are an artist in many different sorts of pursuits, but I guess more well known among those who've seen you online on Twitter is that you're a painter.
Yeah, just as I said, if you type my name into Google, I'm the first thing that comes up is an artist, painter, and stuff. First off, this is a great discussion, and what we should really define and have a lot of fun with is what is an artist? Mm-hmm. What is a craft? What is creative? What is fun? Now, I paint in oils, right? I'm a traditionally trained, actually I've never had a lesson in my life, but I am traditionally trained by study. Again, I read about it, studied. I produce work. At one time I was even using rabbit skin glue for my canvases, linens, lead primed. Same thing that Michelangelo did and Da Vinci. And in fact, I'd have to say the paintings that I produce today are archival. They'll last centuries, when I'm long gone. And that's another neat thing to leave behind is somebody will look at my work. And if you look at my work, you'll see that most of the time, I don't do touristy shit usually. I'm trying to stay true to something that's inside me, which is I create work that is timeless, meaning that, in 100 years, somebody can look at my image. Some of them are kind of sad. I went through a really horrible time in my life, and it affected my work, and it just kind of carried over. Lots of times it's a woman walking away, or maybe a lonely, dark scene. But the thing is that they're timeless. They move you emotionally, and in 100 years, somebody's going to look at that image of some woman standing by herself on a bridge in Venice, and he'll wonder what she's thinking. He won't throw it in the garbage. He'll just look at it and go, what is that? What was happening then? What was on that woman's mind? But that's one form of art. And I'm going to tell you something. I told you I like to weld. So I built my own chopper, which is why I got a gold tooth. And it was a beautiful chopper. The thing was just gorgeous, man. It was a work. When I was done, it was a work of art. We're sitting in Prague, one of the most beautiful cities I've ever been in.
Isn't it incredible?
It's like incredible. It's like it's hard to walk around here without bumping into stuff. So I believe that good architecture is like an art form. I believe the way some people are master gardeners and how they can make you feel as you enter a space so relaxed and peaceful and wanting to sit down. There are so many ways to express yourself. And why is this important, that what I'm talking about, whether it's music, woodworking, whatever the hell you choose to do, is because I do believe at the core principle, like yourself, I believe that people need to express themselves somehow creatively. And that if they don't, if they're tied into that treadmill, if they're out there on the hamster wheel and getting their shit kicked out of them every day, they can never stand back and just look and say, this is something I really want to do. Scuba diving, I just love diving. And one of the most fascinating parts about it is not just the technical part of it, but I love to take photographs now. I've got this camera rig and I'm going down there and I'm trying to photograph fish. I'm trying to get real close to them, and I had a shark come up to me the other day. It was really cool, and I'm fascinated by this. And so if you can find these things in life, you'll be interested in life. And you'll be able to sit and talk like this to somebody and listen. I know I'm talking a lot right now, but I'm telling you right now, like at the conference, one of the things I do is I listen to people. God gave me 2 ears, 1 mouth, so I should be listening at least twice as much as speaking. And I do. I'll just sit there and I listen to people. I'm interested in their stories. And you will be that person, and people will say, I really like talking to whoever, because you know what? You're listening to them. And they'll have some stories to tell if they live that life where they're doing more of what they want to do rather than what they're forced to do.
It's the single most attractive quality in a person is that their ability to demonstrate an interest in you.
Yeah, that's well put.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Because if they're not interested in you, how can you find them at any level attractive? You know, like if they're not demonstrating that you represent some level of interest or importance, you know, it can be feigned, of course, but when it's sincere, it's such an attractive quality, probably the most attractive quality to me. Yeah.
And guys, you should think about that if you're listening to this when you're talking to women. Mm-hmm. You know, don't tell them all about yourself. Don't tell them how important you are. Just listen. And you know, I did read it. I don't know if this is true, okay, because I can't back it up. But I read a statistic the other day that said up to 40 or 50% of young American males had never been in a relationship with women. And I can't remember if it was defined, I'm not saying sexual as much as like any kind of a long-term relationship. And you know, first off, that is kind of sad. And secondly, you know, we need to make a lot of little Bitcoiners. I mean, you know, my Bitcoin making days are over for little kids, but you know what? For the rest of you guys, you need to get off your ass, get out there, do whatever it takes, but we need to be making a lot more little Bitcoiners. So just as an aside, when you're having a conversation with a woman, you know, really take interest in her, ask her, you know, just listen. Don't try to interject how important you are.
That's true, because I think a lot of guys make the mistake of thinking they have to impress upon how amazing they are. Well, actually, your job is to make her comfortable enough to want to tell you about herself.
I love that. That's it. That's it exactly.
Yeah,
that's what I was trying to say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, we're in agreement.
Well, we need to fight some more.
How did you start teaching yourself about art?
You know, I always loved art. I was one of those stupid kids. You know, when I was 17 years old and dating, I would take a girl in high school, and you know, I never got through high school. I actually was expelled from high school. And I just tell that to people because sometimes there's going to be somebody listening to this and they're thinking, well, this guy, you know, he went to high school and college, and I actually dropped out of college too. So there are a lot of different paths to get to where you want to go. But, you know, I would ask her to go out on a date to like the Denver Art Museum. I would go there, and I'm sure, you know, some probably thought, what the hell is this? But, you know, it was a great place to talk and relax, and, you know, but I loved art. And so, you know, it never stopped.
You never know where there's going to be a crack open for you to enter and discover some new passion. I was never into literature at all. Like, you know, when I say to you, I love writing, like I genuinely love writing. It's my...
And that's an art form.
Yeah. And I was reluctant for most of my life to even read fiction. Non-fiction I can read all day long, literally all day long, and it doesn't tire me. But fiction would really take a toll. I'd struggle to focus on 2 pages of reading, and I was just like, where's this going, and whatever. But my in was a movie. I found a movie that I absolutely loved. It was so beautifully made. It was called Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Oh, I know that.
You know that movie?
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, it was the modern...
Older.
It was the modern version of it.
Oh, I don't know if I've seen it.
Then I went back and watched all the older versions and the television series and everything else. And I thought, my God, I love this so much. My girlfriend said, there is a book. I think she said that, or did I discover some other way? Went and read the book. Loved the book. And then I thought, okay, with John le Carré, okay, he's a famous spy novel writer. Then I read some of his other books, and then I realized, actually, as much as aesthetically it was beautiful, the movie that I've originally discovered was beautiful, it was the suspense and the nostalgia of sort of Cold War era espionage that really grabbed me, and I absolutely loved that. And so I started reading more about that era. Graham Greene. I discovered another author called Somerset Maugham, who was... It wasn't really his genre, but he had one novel, because he was an ex-spy. He had one novel that was a collection of spy stories. And then I discovered his other novels, which were not of that genre. And then from there, I discovered, because I really enjoyed Somerset Maugham, Fitzgerald, Hemingway, and a bunch of others, and Romain Gary. Romain Gary was a tremendous writer that I discovered. He's a French... Hungarian Polish Jew or something like this. He's a really, really fascinating background. And that's how I got into reading literature, fiction, and because I did my best to avoid it for most of my life. And you never know where you're going to discover a passion like that.
You never know.
Yes. And then when I was reading Hemingway, because Hemingway's got a very sort of particular style of writing, but because his writing is a kind of simplified sophistication, right? I guess that's one way of describing it, because he's very direct to the point, right? And I read that and I was able to see his narrative build up, his character arcs and all the rest of it. And I thought, I could do that, surely. I mean, it's part of my ego, right? I do have a big ego. And then I went and tried to do that. And I found that actually it came quite naturally to me. And I really enjoyed the process of doing it. And so now it's like, okay, it was my consolation through my corporate career that I could spend time doing this sort of thing. And now that I've found something that, I'm totally passionate about from a business point of view, from I guess it's an all-encompassing passion, Bitcoin, really. And it's taking up all my time. It's taking me away from my artistic pursuits. I literally don't have any time for it. I don't have any headspace for it. So it's one of the sacrifices of building this business, is that I just don't have the headspace for something I'm incredibly passionate about.
It's funny that you should say that, though, because Bitcoin does do that. And it's probably something we should address, is that Bitcoin has a way of, sucking your brain out. I mean, you become very passionate about Bitcoin. You become, that's why people call us a religious cult, is because we have cult-like characteristics. And you have to realize that can be a very negative aspect of your persona. And it's almost the same discussion that we have had in the past about holding on to Bitcoin so tightly that you never live your life. And that's wrong. Again, life is short. It's going to come to an end. And this idea that Bitcoin is all-consuming, I'm hoping that as time goes forward and more people, like I said, we already have some people in this cycle that have created generational wealth. The amount of coins that were sold in this last rise from 58 up to like 98K was 1 million a day at one time. And they were being sold by long-term holders. Micheal Saylor addressed this on stage. It was kind of a private, like about 100 people, and he was talking about this, the fact that he believes one of the reasons that the price has been kind of stagnated in these areas is because people are turning over coins, and I can back up his statement by looking at on-chain data. People are, finally letting go of some of these coins that they've held. And I mean, let's face it, some guy's got 1,000 coins that he got at $1 a piece, yeah, he's going to peel some off and maybe do something. But I'm just saying to people right now, especially those, because, they're going to be younger than me, you're going to have a wide, long future in front of you, hopefully, and you should not put off everything so that at someday you're standing there with a stack. There are so many things that you can wrap your head around and get involved in this space. That's the other thing. When I say Bitcoin will suck your brains out, what I'm talking about, you go down so many different rabbit holes, and there's no end, by the way. Take it from somebody that fell down like you a few years ago, you never find, there's no bottom in this pit here. You get down there and there's just a bunch of tunnels, like when I was working underground going all over the damn place. I would get lost underground too sometimes. I mean, we had a lot of tunnels down there, and 2 miles down, that's a long way. You don't want to get lost too far. But I'd get turned around and stuff. Well, you get turned around going down these Bitcoin tunnels, and people find themselves, I've noticed this, is one of the problems here is you get so dispersed. I think one of the best things Saylor has ever said is the idea of laser focus. And I know these are opposing ideas. I'm saying on the one hand, don't become so focused on Bitcoin that it's your entire life. But at the same time, you do need to stay within, not your wheel well, but with the things that you're good at doing. I find some people, they're trying to start up all these different projects. I met one recently, and somebody trying to do a new book. And I understand all that, but at the same time, you want to stay focused enough that you can reap the benefits from what's coming. And all the discussion we've had right now is about, in the Bitcoin world, it's a discussion about selling Bitcoin. What do you want to do now? When is the right time? What are you going to do with your life? How do you remain creative? How do you not get dispersed into all these different tunnels at the bottom of the well? These are deep subjects. If you're going to if you're going to do the things that we've been discussing, whether it's how you're going to live your life as a man, to all of these issues, they take introspection. You've got to sit somewhere quietly, and that's so hard to do. Tell me something. When you go to a restaurant, how many people do you see on the fucking phone now? When you see somebody out on a date, and that's another thing, guys, you know what, if you're on a date, you got your fucking phone out, I don't know what planet you came from. That is not the place. This is not the place to do that kind of stuff. When I stay focused, it takes thought, and you'll never get there in this hectic world. Have you noticed, I don't know about you, but I've already noticed my attention span has changed since AI has come onto the place and phones. And I fight it, and I work hard to stop that from happening. But it's insidious, and I think it's going to get worse as we go forward. So I don't know what there's no answer here. I'm just saying be aware of it, and especially if you're a guy, and you're out on a date, you're doing something, get off the damn phone and pay attention to what's going on.
Well, what we were saying before is that giving someone your attention is the most attractive quality, right? And then
it is.
Yes. So the attention span thing is an interesting thing because it's not so much. It wasn't the phone, and it's definitely not AI either. I find AI is actually stimulating my mind, but I'll get into that in a second. It's actually, up until 6 months ago when Helion came on board into the team, it was just me doing everything, right? And so the trouble with that is particularly running this account as I was for 16, 17 hours a day for almost 2 years, is constantly scanning for news. Constantly.
Yes.
Right? And it's like, in a 10, 15 minute cycle, I've probably checked 30 or 40 different sources and repeat that all day, every day. That's what messed with my mind, rather than that. But AI is a fascinating development, and I'm so energized by it and equally terrified. But the main thing I was going to say is what it's doing to my brain is it's challenging me to think through it, because what I'm using it for at the moment is what they call vibe coding.
I've heard of that, yes.
You've heard of that. Essentially, there are different aspects of it. There's some people who use AI to write the code for them based on a prompt. Mm-hmm. And there's a platform that I use called Replit that pretty much it builds the full stack of an app, right? From back end, front end, UI, everything. And I'm finding it incredibly intellectually challenging because I'm very strong on the conceptual stuff, the creative stuff, and then I give it a prompt. Let's say I want to create some kind of app, right? Like flight monitor or something, like monitor all the flights that are over this city or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then it creates what it does, and then I can iterate every single little feature. And then once I've iterated that and it kind of looks like what I want, then I can look at, I can do a QA, quality assurance run, make sure actually it looks like all the functions are there, but when I click on the buttons, does anything actually happen like it's supposed to? Change the animations, the interface, the colors, the lineups, the layouts, all that sort of stuff. I find that use of AI incredibly invigorating for my mind because I'm totally engaged and immersed in creating something. So it's an interactive thing rather than a relay of responsibility or an outsourcing of responsibility for thinking.
I get that.
So, and what I'm doing, even when I use AI as a research tool, I look at what it gives me back with a very skeptical eye, and it's almost like I am the school teacher correcting the student, because I never take what it gives me on face value. I'm always doubting the source, and I'm always double checking the links to see, because sometimes it hallucinates and just it looks like it's giving you some links, but they're dead.
I've seen
It's just created that. And so I'll double check which sources has it used. Do I consider those credible? And if they're not, then I might do an iteration of the prompt, or maybe I use a different AI. So what I find is, interestingly enough, the Chinese AI platform is a much more accurate an AI research tool than, for example, OpenAI. I'm not suggesting, I'm not making a value judgment on which technology is better, but I feel like when I use ChatGPT, it's nerfed. It's almost like it's psychologically manipulating, like, oh, great question, Archie. Well, like, I don't need that. Whereas DeepSeek is kind of like a really studious Asian student who just wants to give you the right answer. It's just like, bang, here's the answer. Here's what you wanted, here's the answer. And you can when you go on a deep research mode, because they all have a similar sort of, you can actually read its thoughts, and it just blows me away at how thorough it is. You know, you just give it a prompt or a problem statement, and it's just so thorough in how it considers what you want, why you might want it, before it approaches formulating an answer for you. It's fantastic, super impressive.
Well, I think that your approach to this is probably in the right direction, meaning you're using it and it's actually stimulating your thought process. You know, I think that it's probably not going to that's probably not the path that some people are going to take with it.
No.
And, you know, I think for me, you know, just tying it back into my world, the Bitcoin world, I think where we're going to see this go insane is in AI agentic agents, you know, that are actually out there independently interacting with each other. And I'll tell you right now, they're not going to be going down to the local Fifth Third Bank or some other damn place to establish an account.
I can't wait to see a use case that I think can scale, because I definitely think, because that's a capability, I can envisage a scenario where that's just right across the board. It's almost like a back end of the internet where these API agentic AIs are just interacting with one another. I can see that happening, but I'm waiting to see a use case that I think is going to scale and then use Bitcoin to do that.
Well, you know, the thing is, let's just take it from the standpoint, let's just say that it's successful in that these AI agents have enough sentient, you know, intelligence that they're actually able to perform tasks. You know, you can see right now from nothing more than a prompt, they actually, you know, we can use AI to establish a website, you know, an API, and now as soon as it needs to interact, it's going to need money. And we all know it's going to be digital money. Now, I want to see that layer built on Bitcoin. That's where I want this to go. And that is, there are already people building in this space to do that. I want to see Lightning as part of that network, and there's no reason it can't be. You see, I'm sure you saw the, you know, the incredible news that came out of Vegas on the Lightning Labs said that Block had established a Lightning network node with a $10 million flow, and they achieved 10% interest, you know, $1 million. Well, you know, right now we already saw that USDT, Tether, is going to come into the Lightning Network. They want to provide these nodes, and these nodes are expanding right now. Now, I'm not talking about the number of nodes. I'm talking about nodes that are getting more powerful and more interconnected. That is the trend. That's where this is going. And they need money. And that money is going to be, in my mind, it should be Bitcoin, and that money is going to go, I believe, across the planet. Once we have that interaction, that interface going. You know, another thing that most people don't think about is that, and this ties back to what we were discussing earlier about template creation. You know, all these companies that are going to have Bitcoin, that they want to do anything with Bitcoin, like if they're a large financial institution, and picture JP Morgan, and, you know, once Jamie Dimon dies or gets shoved down a stairwell, when that company is fully onboarded with Bitcoin, these companies are going to have access to those templates. They're going to be either, I think what's going to end up happening is they're going to end up trying to get into the mining space. Everybody's going to have some ability to get onto a template where they can include transactions. And I think that this layer 2 is going to have to expand very rapidly. And when it does, it's all going to be these AI agents. I mean, they're going to overwhelm the system. There's going to be so much input and flow through on this network. And that is going to be a place, you know, I've talked about how you're never going to have to sell your Bitcoin. Guess what? I mean that. I think that at your age, as you get to a point, you're going to be able to see these products, not just lending products. You're going to be able to earn income. You know what? If Block can do that, there is no damn reason why you can't do that, and other people that, you know, come together to form that liquidity across the network. You could be earning yield. Now, I will tell anybody watching this, you know, Bitcoin, native Bitcoin on a hardware wallet, okay, does not generate yield. I mean, it's like a bearer instrument. It is. And it's like a gold brick, you don't have shoved up your ass or something. It doesn't generate yield. So you're going to be sitting there and I'm telling you, well, you'll have yield products. That's because of the nature of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is going to be the asset that everybody wants. Everybody. And when you talk about AI and AI, agentic agents acting interdependent from any human input, that's going to be part of that network. They're going to need digital money. I hope it's Bitcoin or on layer 2, personally.
Yeah, I think it's going to be amazing.
Oh,
I'm just waiting for that breakthrough use case, and the innovation will definitely be there. There is a potential for stable coins to usurp Bitcoin.
Yes.
And that's a threat.
It is.
And maybe it's not a threat. Maybe it's just a parallel use case for a different thing. Who knows? But I wonder, we were just talking about Bitcoin mining and mining pools before. I wonder because providing Bitcoin liquidity for Lightning channels apparently is quite a laborious thing that requires some kind of management.
Well managed.
Monitoring at the very least. And I wonder will there be an equivalent of Lightning liquidity pools in the same way that we have Bitcoin mining pools, where you might be able to, I shudder to use the word, you might be able to stake your Bitcoin in a non-custodial way.
Did you say stake? Did you just say the word stake? We're all having PTSD from the last cycle. We're all going, that's why I said it does not generate yield, because of all those jackasses that thought it did generate yield last time. Yeah. And now you're talking about stake.
But in a non-custodial way. Now, and I don't even know if that's technically even possible, right? I'm just using words.
Actually, you know what? I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you another thing too. Yes, you do have to have a well-managed node, and it's difficult, but what you just said about that pools, that is an interesting idea. I've never really thought about that. It's almost something I just have to kind of sit back and think about it. It's a really interesting.
I told you I'm very creative.
Yeah, it's a very interesting idea, and I'm wondering to myself, because you know me, I would probably put a little bit of money in it just so I could start studying.
Well, I think a lot of people would if they could solve the custody issue, right? Mm-hmm. And you go, okay, well, I might put 5% of my Bitcoin into a liquidity pool that someone else would manage. And when I say someone else, I mean like a reputable service that can manage, and provided there were sort of risk management protocols and assurances there that your Bitcoin is not at risk, right?
Yes.
That they can't do Celsius, rehypothecate, and all that sort of stuff.
Exactly.
So there are obviously checks and balances that need to be in place for something like that to be even an option. But as an idea alone, right? I just wonder, I'm not going to want to manage a channel, right?
Same.
I've got other things to do. But I might be able to put my Bitcoin up for some liquidity and earn something on that in a very utilitarian way, rather than the scammy way of lending it out to some hedge fund who's going to rehypothecate and gamble it away, for example, right? We know that's not a viable option.
Well, let me tell you something else that'll get you really excited. That $1 million that they earned, that 10% that they earned, that wasn't in dollars. It was in Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Think about that. Mm-hmm. Now imagine that you had a product where, because I'm thinking about what you already suggested, imagine that you had a product that could give you 10% yield, and it was in Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. How excited would you be then? Can you imagine not getting cuck bucks back, like printed confetti? I mean, these things that are sitting in my wallet right now, these little pieces of paper that are colored, these are this is not better than the wampum beads that we were throwing out to our Native Americans when we got here, and not here, but in Manhattan.
In the United States, sure.
So
the only thing I do worry about the security aspect. I think it was explained to me the other day. It might have been Samson. I was talking to Samson Mao. They're not as secure as having your Bitcoin in cold storage, so there is some kind of risk element there, right? but
You know,
it should be manageable.
That's good that you brought that up, because you're right about that. If I'm correct and I say, you know what, Bitcoin held in cold storage in your tight fist here, and I hold my Bitcoin in my fist, by the way. If it's held in your fist and you're not going to let it go, that is a bearer instrument. There is no yield. So every single time that we talk about yield being generated, there is a risk. You know, when I was working underground one time, I mean, my understanding of risk and what my tolerance was saved my life. I mean, we were tasked with, and I probably told this story before, but I won't make it long, but you know, the bottom line is one of the worst, shittiest jobs in the mine was to go walk down the drift tunnel and poke at the ceiling to see if rocks would come down. And you know, the ground, like here, right next to me, they had all these old rebar steel things, and they were from when we were drilling. You know, they were about this big around, enough to put a stick of dynamite down, and then they were made out of like tungsten carbide steel, so they weighed a ton. You know, and so you're going to poke at the ceiling. So if you reach down and you pick out a real short rod, guess what? As you spend the afternoon going around, it's pretty easy to carry. If you pick up a really long 12-foot, 15-foot long piece of steel, it's going to weigh a shitload, and you're going to carry it around all afternoon. That's your job. That's what you do. Well, you know what? I was a young man, but my risk, unlike you, my risk tolerance was pretty low, and I correctly assessed the threat, and I picked up a 12-foot rod, and this dipshit next to me, Flash, who was not like the brightest candle down in the mine, he picked up a short little rod. And so we're walking by there, and he's poking around at rocks that are almost on top of his head. And I'm going down there and stuff with my big heavy rod and everything. Well, you know, I poked a rock in front of me, right in front of me. Fucking thing came down, it was as big as a Volkswagen. I mean, if I had been Flash sticking under like this, I'd been dead. And, you know, I remember looking at his face, and I think I screamed like a little girl. And so when you're lending, whatever program you're using to get yield on your Bitcoin, there is a risk to this. And you're correct in bringing it out, because even in these lightning channels where we're playing around with in our minds and stuff as a mind game, guess what? There is risk there. You are absolutely correct. There's only one thing that's not the risk, and that's holding in your hand. And even then, you guys think about some things.
Well, we're not very good at assessing risk as human beings. I mean, even with like the chance of rain, it's like there's 20% chance of rain, says the Bureau, Meteorology Bureau, and people get upset when it rains, because then they go, you said it was only 20% chance. I said, yes.
And it did.
And it did.
Yeah, exactly. And you may lose your Bitcoin if you're not careful. That's and right. You did. Yeah. It's gone.
But they assess anything that's sort of like, I think people can understand a 50-50 chance, like it either rains or it doesn't. But anytime it sort of gets below 60-40, 70-30, I think they sort of write off in their mind that it's just not going to happen. The chances of it happening, they write it down to zero. So
well, just remember what Jethro said. You know what the risk is, the real risk.
The risk is there.
And then know what your tolerance is.
Yes.
Okay? Can you take a lot of risk or not?
And tolerance is, what if the worst case scenario happened? Mm-hmm. Can you deal with that emotionally, financially?
Because you cannot lose your Bitcoin. I'm just telling you right now, you can't. People work too hard for it, and you cannot lose it. It's too precious. And
have you met Dominic Frisby?
Yes, and I think we're going to have dinner tonight.
Oh,
yeah.
Great guy. He came in yesterday. Fantastic.
Yeah, funny too.
He's
a funny guy. I can't compete with him on comedy level. That guy is, and he's got a wit too about him.
He's quite talented. Yeah,
yes.
you can definitely tell. I haven't consumed any of his comedy yet, but I will look him up. But just talking to him, you can tell he's got that in him, right? He was telling he lost all his Bitcoin at one point.
Oh my God!
He had quite a stack, and he was hacked and he lost it all.
I did not know that story.
Yeah, ask him about that.
I will talk to him about that this evening. Yeah. Oh, so, that should send chill to anyone right now that's watching or listening, because it does happen. Somebody that I have a lot of respect for and is very intelligent ended up losing all his Bitcoin, 200 Bitcoin. That is a catastrophic event. And I don't know if you've ever had an experience, I have, where you have done something where you thought immediately you've lost your Bitcoin, and you have that sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach. You can never deal with that. And another thing too, when I talk about courage and conviction, it does take courage to buy Bitcoin. And especially if you're doing it on cold storage, the very first time you purchase Bitcoin, it's scary. And so you've got to be thinking about that. It's something, some of the best purchases I've ever made with Bitcoin, like in that last cycle when I was going all over the place, was when I made the purchase and afterwards I felt like I could go out on the lawn and throw up or something. That was like one of my best purchases. Or that night I'm going, oh my God, again, what have I done?
George?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome, bud.
It's been a pleasure of mine to host you for this discussion. I love to see artists in this space because it's one of the things that actually, Stack Hodler?
Yes, of course. Yes. Yeah.
It's one of the reasons, like, he writes with kind of like an artist's pen, right? And to see someone bring, an element of joy onto my timeline through your art, through
the Bitcoin
the things
life.
that you advocate for, yes, that's right.
Those are cool.
The low time preference, but actually low time preference and spend that time in a way that enriches your life. And you do that for me. I'm really grateful that we have people like you. And I hope that we get more and more people with an artistic bent into this space because it enriches our lives. Art does enrich our lives and artists help us do that. So thank you so much for coming in, sharing some of your life story and some wisdom as well. Thank you, George.
Well, you're really kind. I appreciate your saying that. And, I really do appreciate your saying that. It means a lot to me. And, this is going to be such a better world. I mean, you're going to look back on this day someday and you're just going to, and the people out there, you're going to look back and go, oh my God, this was the start of a great revolution and we are going to win. And it's just going to be great. So cheers to everyone involved in this space. I love you, bud.
George.